For those of you who have been to prison jail, what is it like? 50 days in Macomb County Jail. MT. Clemens. MI. Cold. Boring. Smells like bleach and feet. The worst part was hearing a guy screaming for the deputies because his chest hurt. They ignored him. He had a heart attack and died a few feet from me. I see that people complain about boredom during quarantine, but I can't even imagine the amount of boredom in jail. How old was the guy who got a heart attack? That's horrible. It's not quite traditional jail and doesn't last quite as long, but I found it far worse. I was arrested back in the mid-80s in my youth, living in the former Soviet Union in Eastern Europe, and served 8 hours in the farm pit. Basically just a concrete pit at a factory farm that's empty when you go in, but then they shovel in pig tea as the pigs produce it. I thought I was getting off light with a 1-day punishment, but honestly it's been almost 35 years and I'm still a wee bit traumatized from it and still feel some anxiety when I see a pig farm. Even in a movie. I never knew anything could smell or feel that bad. In prison in Colorado, I was roomed with a guy who killed his wife and her lover and split his own throat, yet he was a really nice person to me. There are gangs of every variety and it was hard. I was roomed with a guy who kidnapped and brutally raped his 9-year-old niece along with his brother, who was only serving time for accessory in a different prison. Chained her underneath the sink in his trailer's kitchen and left her to die there. She was discovered 3 days later after a huge search. Oddly enough, the medical examiner's office I worked for performed the death investigation for that little girl, so I saw all the crime scene photos. I obviously didn't tell him that. I only knew this information because of my work. But when he said his victim's name saw a very unique name stuttering one of his "I'm innocent" diatribes, I connected the dots. Huge psychopath, but wasn't violent and was actually kind of conversational at times. This was only a medium security prison. 2. Honestly, jail was pretty chill. I got popped for simple weed possession. Yay, Texas. My cellmates were a friendly black man and a really old Indian man. Had some good convo. Bullshit about how dumb my charge was. I got bailed out like 8 hours later. Nothing crazy happened. I did have to poop in front of them though. That was awkward. 5/10 would not do again. Been in a number of US jails. Food quality varies, but generally you'll be hungry from dinner, 6 p.m. till breakfast, 6 a.m. Usually you can get some commissary items by trading desserts or playing poker, if you're good at it. Most of my time is spent sleeping and reading books. Some people prefer TV and you often don't get to choose what's on. I've generally been in minimum security, so haven't seen many fights. But I've been on cell blocks where someone's freaking out for over an hour. And this inevitably happens around midnight when you're trying to sleep. Mostly I've learned to keep my head down and do as the officers say. The beds suck. The food sucks. And you're inside at least 23 hours a day. 3/10 would not recommend. The worst part about it was the dementors. Close your eyes. Picture a convict. What's he wearing? Nothing special. Baseball cap on backward. Baggy pants. He says something ordinary like, "Yo. That's shizzle." Okay. Now slowly open your eyes again. Who are you picturing? A black man? Wrong. That was a white woman. Surprised? Well, shame on you. The longest I have ever done was 90 days in a very small jail. Boring 90 days at most. We had like 17 inmates including doc and females. I played a lot of spades. Watched a lot of stupid things on TV. Real Housewives, holy fuck. We usually had cigarettes smuggled in from the road crew, so that was cool. My cellmate was in a PC program and he was on trial for murder. The dude was annoying as fuck. The highlights of my sentence include tripping in LSD for the first time ever. And burning books in the shower cause it is winter and it was fking cold. I've been as a lawyer a couple of times. And that is good enough for me. I'm fairly claustrophobic. So as an attorney visiting clients, you walk through one door. They shut it and lock it behind you. and a few seconds later unlock the next door you have to walk through. That moment locked between those two doors is awfully creepy for me. Can't imagine being in that for more than a couple hours. Also, it blows my mind that they genuinely don't feed you enough to survive in many jails prisons. Everyone has to buy from the commissary to subsidize their nutrition. My brother was in prison. He was almost beaten to death by guards. He still won't talk about it and it's been over 20 years. Edit to add. He's a paranoid schizophrenic with bipolar disorder. He was in and out of the system since he was 9 years old, although the schizophrenia didn't come on to his later mid-20s and the bipolar after the prison stint. We believe the bipolar was trauma-induced created by the beating, although that's not an official finding. He lives alone, talks to very few people and is musically gifted. He plays guitar masterfully and sings just as well. If you have 5 hours to spare, he has a wonderful conspiracy story that involves Ozzy and Sharon Osbourne having Randy Rhoads killed. He backs it up with YouTube videos that seem completely harmless to the average person, but he shows you what they're really saying with the hidden messages. I love him. A lot. But spending 5 minutes with him is mentally exhausting and emotionally traumatic. I'll just tell one story. I went in thinking I would be out in no time. I was in a cell block with about 12 other guys. There was a common area and individual cells. I was really shy about pooping in front of others. So I held it. For like 2 days. On the second or third day I couldn't hold it. So I waited until I thought everyone else was distracted in the common. Went quietly to my cell. Shut the door as much as I could without latching it. And sat down. About 5 seconds later the door comes blowing open. And in walk every single person in my cell block. They all formed a semicircle around me. Arms folded. Demanding I finish my tea while they watch. So there I sat. Pooping. In front of 12 strangers. It was horrible. But I have literally no poop shyness anymore. So silver lining, I guess. That's crazy. Everyone took shitting privacy seriously where I was. You'd put toilet paper in the door. Or hang a tea sheet, use your sheets to block a view of the toilet area. And nobody would ever come in besides sudden lockdowns where there was no choice. If something like that happened to me, I'd probably die from never shitting again. I'm a shy pooper too. Like if someone is walking around outside of the toilet or just making noise in the house. I can't do it. If this happened to me, I'd probably just hold it in again. It's funny to think those guys knew what you were up to though. Try to sleep as much as possible. Cause it's not pleasant to be awake in a room filled with cots and a variety of random strangers. Some of whom are cool while others are scary. There's a hierarchy, so if you're lucky you will locate and secure a buddy near a cot who offers to show you the ropes and lets you use her shampoo and wants to play cards. Do not tell the intake nurse the truth if she asks you if you have ever been suicidal. Cause I was long ago. And since I answered honestly, I was sent to solitary confinement where I had to be buck naked with all lights on 24 hours a day and no blankets. Only paper towel thing and Camaro on you with creepy perverted guard watching you all night long. Jail is just boring and you mostly sleep all day or read whatever is available. Unfortunately mostly it's Bibles. Do lots of push-ups and sit-ups. Not that scary, but it is unpleasant. Like staying in the waiting room of the DMV for weeks. Food is bland and not much of it. You order some food from the commissary but it's super expensive. $2 for a ramen pack or something like that. Dollar store food priced at $10. Mostly boring, but there are periods of excitement. For example, when 20 people jumped one guy, he worked in laundry and kept giving someone the wrong size clothes, and then everyone realized they hated him and beat him up and down the stairs. Very small town jail for a weekend stay at 18 years old. Do worrying. Eat. Sleep. Get hassled from Barney Fife. They left the cell door open during the day. We had to mop the floor. Hell, maybe we volunteered. Got to check out the library in the jail. No blanket party. No rape. No tats. Pretty easy time all told. Which I guess makes up for being arrested for second-degree burglary for stealing a mattress out of an unoccupied tent at a Girl Scout camp in the mountains. In all fairness, a tent is considered a dwelling. So yeah, I was a burglar. Yup. Don't do the crime if you don't want the time or whatever. I had a lot of drugs in my system and I had a pretty good time. It was cold and I'd been living on the streets of Vegas for a while. I was only there one night, but it got me off the street finally. I threw doubles on my third turn, so I got out. Depending on the house rules and the state of the game, you were better off in there. Think of the absolute last place you'd ever want to be and check it out. They won't let you leave. Jokes aside, there's no way to accurately describe it. Having your freedom taken away is not something you can understand until it happens to you. Which is why people who say is like jail prison sound like idiots. I mean, I spent 3 days in the psych ward and wasn't allowed out during that time. And even that was traumatic for me. Constant panic attacks. Crying. Suffering. My mind can't even fathom jail. I think I'd be left permanently mentally scarred. Jail is boring. Cold. Crappy food. You don't want to go there. Yeah, not me, but a friend says it gets boring. It's like being back at school in a way. Wake up, have breakfast, play some Xbox. Have some arts and crafts or other type of lessons. Play some pool, then have dinner. Go watch some Sky TV for a few hours and play some more Xbox. Have some tea, then back to watching Sky TV and playing Xbox. Go to sleep and rinse repeat every day, lol. Doesn't sound bad, but he says when you're doing the exact same thing for a year every day, it can mentally drain you. 8 days in solitary confinement was one of the worst experiences of my life. 23 hours in a cell, 1 hour out to walk the pod and shower. Lights on for 16, out for 8. No blanket, no books. Noting that could possibly be put in the toilet to clog it and flood the cell to get out for a little while. Apparently that was a problem. I begged for a Bible, atheist, or anything to keep my mind occupied and was refused. 1/10 would not recommend. Honestly, it's not too bad by itself. We were all kind of like a family there. The worst part for me was just how uninformed I was. I had no idea how long I was going to be there and no idea what was going to happen to my house and job. Luckily it all worked out thanks to my friends and family. I feel truly bad for people who don't have people to look out for them. I just couldn't imagine. I have misophonia, so I couldn't stand the snoring and didn't have access to commissary, so I couldn't get earplugs. I was freshly 18 and tried to sleep in our church after being locked out of my parents' place. Ironically, over religious differences, didn't want to serve a Mormon mission. The set of keys I had nabbed that I thought would get me into the church didn't work, outdated, and I just started walking to a friend's. A neighbor called it in and I was charged with attempted unlawful entry. I spent hours and hours in the shower to drown out the sound. And didn't call anyone for bail because I was so messed up. I was nicknamed Waterboy. 5 days later somebody filed a missing persons report for me and my friend's parents bailed me out. The financial strain of being independent during the 2009 depression led to homelessness and some other unpleasantness. Especially with all the fines and probation and rethinking class costs. I was able to get to college in 2012 after getting kinda back on my feet. But I feel like I never quite got over this time in my life. 24 days in county in Florida. I read 27 books while I was there. I didn't get my first book till my 3rd day. It's an indescribable level of boredom. I only stopped reading when I could no longer find a comfortable position for myself. I also wrote about 40 pages of notes, diary entries, which is something I had never done before. Bars aren't as fun as the civilian world. Here is what some did. They got a trash bag when they were on cleaning duty. Asked everyone on the unit to give up their oranges and apples. Sugar was provided through the canteen. Morning bread. Hot water from the showers. Mix it. Hide the bag as long as you can. Few days and some people drank. CO found the bag. Double lock for a few days. Aside from that, the highlight of the day was when you went to bed cause you get to mark another day complete. And closer to freedom. Worst part was all the food commercials of fast food restaurant. That was the torture, to be honest. You're fed. The legal minimum. Jail in Manhattan for one night. Exhausting process. Took all night to get booked at the police station. Put in a holding cell. Transferred to the main jail. Room full of 25 guys. The metal benches were so full that people were sitting on the floor. No chance of sleeping. One toilet. I got yelled at for not flushing fast enough. One joker was keeping everyone entertained. Feel bad. He had just been celebrating with his friends in a park with a couple bottles of wine until police came to harass him. As Nick cops like to do, this was during the stop and frisk era. After 24 hours. Was finally appointed a lawyer. Transferred to a different cell. Went to court. Released. Court was pretty painless. Cops made up shit that I never said though. 1/5 stars. Interesting experience. But I'm not interested in going back. Food was subpar too. Never been to prison but worked in highway maintenance with inmate laborers within the last year. They get paid a wage of $0.65. Not per hour but 65 cents for a full day of labor. Really f***ing dirty. Nasty. Disgusting. Imagine a bus stop public toilet. But you're locked in it with a bunch of random crackheads. It's not dramatic like the movies. It's gross. Boring. And uncomfortable. Forget basic medical care. You're riding that shit out alone until you're inches from a lawsuit. I've never been to jail prison but I have a few family members who have been locked up. I have a story to contribute. One of my uncles, who got caught up, was being asked some general questions before being admitted to the jail. He was in a shitty mood. Being arrogant. And not listening or paying any attention to the questions this correctional officer was reading off this list. My uncle was like yeah. To everything this CEO was saying. Just trying to get through this. The correctional officer stopped and asked him, "Are you sure?" And my uncle thought it was an ego thing, so he's like, "Yes, I'm sure." Turns out he said yes twice to the question of suicidal feelings or tendencies. He was taken to a separate area of the jail and put under suicide watch for like 3 or 4 days. They throw you into a windowless cell. No bed. No furniture. Only a toilet and a camera mounted on the wall to monitor your every move. They strip you bare ass naked and the bright fluorescent lights never shut off. Also near complete isolation. The only time you interact with someone is during mealtime. They also keep the temperature in this cell freezing cold in there to calm wear you down. IDK man. That sounds like absolute hell to me. It's cold at night. Because of the ventilator. I now hate it when someone slams the door. Always hungry. Except if you have money to buy noodle. Bored as fuck. I have a family member in prison. He's mostly just bored. It's rarely dangerous on his cell block and he's older and pretty quiet, so he doesn't have trouble with inmates and COs. He reads a lot. He never liked TV but now he enjoys it. And they mostly watch trashy reality shows or nature docs. He works and has some commissary but has to also buy things like his own razors. His roomie is an elderly murderer who is clean and polite. His biggest issue is that most of their sentences are indeterminate. Almost no one, according to him, gets parole when they're first eligible. He has no idea how long he'll be locked up and it plagues him. I was in jail for like 2 weeks. Was surprisingly chill. Just read books and slept like 13 hours a day. Watched TV when I didn't want to read. Had one cool cellmate that got replaced a few days later by some dude who'd been to prison in and out his whole life. He was pretty annoying. But gladly I got out soon after that. The thing I liked about jail was I didn't have to think about anything or do anything, as there was nothing to do. No responsibilities. At least for the time I was in there. Just read, eat, shit, watch TV, and I felt content because there was really nothing else I could put my time towards. The food was okay, but gave you the shits. That kinda sucked, I guess. Was also pretty annoying that we requested cleaning supplies and they didn't get us them for days and days and the place was getting pretty gross. In CT. If you were there before 95 it was crazy and you had to always watch your back. Now it's Snitch City and if you want to fight be prepared to get possibly charged and sentenced to another 5 years. But all that stuff that happens in Rikers or in Texas and Cali prisons doesn't happen here. I know a few COs who are bored and actually complain that nothing happens anymore. Being alone. Childhood in foster care. Youth in UV. And spent 2 nights in jail as an adult. The solitude and loneliness is the worst part. Hours and hours and hours. It's how I imagine hell to be. I can't imagine someone doing life in solitude. There's levels to that shit. 4 years in prison. Sucked BC, it took so long. But learned so much about life that I needed to know. Got sober. Got into great shape and met some awesome people. Overall, I had fun. I caught a charge for public intox and forgot which day I was supposed to be in court to get it settled. In turn, warrant was issued for me. They finally caught up with me and I was arrested. I already had somewhat of a bad track record. So, I was given 366 days in prison. I was put in a dorm with about 40 other women. A bit scared because I had never done time. I was on the top bunk and slept as much as possible. One evening I discovered that my roll of toilet paper had been stolen out of my footlocker. And we only got 1 roll every week. No exceptions. Socks and underwear were very hard to come by also. I was told by another inmate who had stolen my TP. In turn, I waited until she went to rec yard the following day and got her only pair of socks from her bunk bag. I had waited for a couple days to poop because it's just 4 toilets off to side with no privacy. Needless to say, I had to go extremely bad. She was still out at rec. I proceeded to grunt out this massive turd into her sock. I tied it up and put it in her pillowcase. My TP was never stolen again. Late to the game. But I spent 12 hours in county jail a few weeks ago. I went in very intoxicated. But everyone was pretty nice. I made a joke about the show wasn't if I'd have to stab someone. And the guard repeated several times that no one ever gets raped there. I woke up to the other lady in the cell with me having explosive diarrhea about 1.5 feet away from my head. While simultaneously coughing and crying. She was so redneck I couldn't even understand her. I just slept on my mat until it was time to go. But I'm pretty sure I got covered from Lady Boomhua.